Milling Through History presents The Mystery of the Crystal Skulls. With Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, audiences were introduced to a rather unique phenomenon found in Central American and South American archaeology, namely that of the crystal skull. But many questions arose with the discovery of these items, namely, what were they? Where did they come from? What were they used for? These mysteries are naturally very difficult to solve, and everyone's favorite archaeologist, Indiana Jones, had his own particular clues, namely that they were extraterrestrial. And yet the real crystal skulls are rather unique in and of themselves. And so we have to ask the question of, what are they? Well, the crystal skulls are sculptures which claim to have been made in pre-Columbian societies. However, some people have also claimed that the skulls have mystical powers to them. But that particular belief has been greatly debunked. Modern analysis of the skulls have shown that, contrary to popular belief, they were never made by pre-Columbian society, but rather in the 19th century in Europe, most likely from Germany. And so, these rather fantastic archaeological discoveries aren't even really archaeological discoveries. So, what is it that makes them so fascinating? Well, much of it just comes from the way in which their origins occur, and the fact that they were magically appearing. And so there are 4 specific skulls which are seen as the most notable. And these noteworthy skulls are what perhaps helps to build the legend of the crystal skull itself. The first one is entitled the British Museum Skull. First appearing in 1881 at the shop of Eugene Boban, the skull was originally sold in New York City and then eventually was bought by Tiffany & Company, who then in turn sold it to the British Museum at the cost that they had paid in 1897. Now, the British determined that their skull was a fake made with modern tools at some point in the 19th century in Europe. And yet, as a work of art, it was still worthy to be put onto exhibition. And so, in that respect, they never claimed that it actually is an archaeological discovery, but more a modern work of art. The second skull is that of the Mitchell-Hedges skull. Discovered in 1924, this skull is perhaps the most famous and enigmatic of them all. Found by Anna Mitchell-Hedges, daughter of author F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, she claimed to have found it under the collapsed altar of Lubantum in modern-day Belize. The earliest reference to the skull was found in 1936, as F.A. Mitchell-Hedges mentions the skull once in a very early copy of his autobiography, but subsequent editions would omit the reference. Anna would continue to tout the skull as authentic until her death in 2007. And when the Smithsonian would get its hands on it and examine the skull, they would make a number of determinations about it. The first one is that the skull was carved with a high-powered tool with a diamond head. And the second was that it was not an archaeological discovery, but again, a forgery made in the 1930s. To further go on, the National Geographic Society would use forensic facial reconstruction on the skull and discovered the face it created was not that of a person from Central America, but rather that of a European female, thus showing that, once more, a creative story does not create an archaeological piece of evidence. The third skull is the Paris skull. Now, having some of the most extensive analysis done to it, the French determined that the skull was not only a fake, but they were able to prove that the skull was made after 1740. And so we seem to be 0-3 when it comes to skulls. As such, why is it that they still become popular? Well, they end up in museums. And so even the fourth skull, that of the Smithsonian, which would arrive there in 1992, would be claimed as that of an Aztec skull. Now, with modern technology, analysis proved once more we're 0-4, as it was a fake, and is on display as a modern fake in the Natural History Museum. And just like the story that we had earlier of Moses Shapira, wherein he created a culture and all of his fake archaeological evidence became valuable, these skulls themselves, even as fakes, proved to be valuable, namely as works of art and a way in which society itself creates a story in order to fit a piece of evidence that they cannot otherwise explain. So remember, if you go out into the jungle and happen to discover a crystal skull out of nowhere, it could be a fake, In which case, well, I hope you're a good storyteller, because that's the only way anyone's going to buy it. For more information, please consider these suggested titles. Be sure to click on the left-hand side of the screen to subscribe to our show, and on the right-hand side for our latest episode. And we will see you again for the next episode of Milling Through History.